Apple might have killed off the iPod line, but China's still producing little nuggets of musical entertainment. But are they any match for the beloved iPod? I purchased a few of what I found to be the most interesting devices from a brand with 0% feedback on Aliexpress, with 4 devices costing me about $140 US. Each could be compared to a similar form of iPod, including the iPod Nano, Mini, and Touch. One appears to be running some kind of Android operating system, while the other's some dedicated OS. But the real question is, did we get what we paid for? The most costly of the 3 is the Android player, which could be described as an Android iPod Touch, supposedly packing 16 gigs of storage, a gig of RAM, and Android 8.1, all of which we'll validate later. With the box stating they'll not be responsible for printing mistakes, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the listed specifications. It certainly has an interesting back panel. Included with all these players is the usual assortment of accessories, including a charging cable, cheap sounding headphones, and a case. The next device I accidentally purchased 2 of. This design is what I usually think of when I think of an old MP3 player, that are not iPods. However, I wasn't expecting this one to be so heavy. This tiny thing comes in at almost 100 grams, which is about 50 less than my phone. According to Aliexpress, the casing is made from magnesium alloy, but it may very well have weights inside to make it feel heavier. The last one left to unbox is similar to an iPod Nano if it were to have a touchscreen. Its 32GB of storage appears entirely reliant on this 32GB micro SD card on the side, which does allow for upgradability but makes me feel stupid for paying more for the higher capacity model when I already have SD cards I could have used in it. With them all out of their boxes, it's time to take a closer look at them. The first of which looks like it comes straight out of 2005. Is that interface a flashback or what? Of course it does regular MP3 things, but what's more interesting is what comes preloaded on it. Besides 2 songs and a couple of photos of nature, is the most random compilation of slow-mo clips. Like the other, it has an SD card expansion slot and Bluetooth, which is pretty good considering most iPods had neither. The second device is more like an iPod Nano, if it were to have a touch screen and not the click wheel. It's 32GB in size, but as I mentioned earlier, that is purely the size of the SD card installed. Theoretically, you could upgrade it or even downgrade its storage very easily. It's running a custom OS which is, well, for the most part, poorly translated. It does have some odd features such as the ability to change wallpapers between just 2 pictures, and was preloaded with 4,000 audio files, most of which are not music but audio lessons for English or Chinese. The only Chinese song I remotely understood was this one titled Mojito, which contained the word Havana. That was all I needed to know, that this song was about drinking mojitos in Cuba, something I've done myself. It seems English isn't the only poorly translated language, with even some of the language options being spelt incorrectly. But what's more interesting to me is what's inside this device, and more specifically, how does it work? While the back comes off fairly easily, it's only clipped into place so a simple plastic pick can detach it. Inside there isn't much to see other than the advertised 500 mAh battery. But taking the board out anyway, we can see the other side, which has a little more, containing the buttons, SD card reader, and ports. By far the most interesting of the 3 is this Android-powered MP3 and MP4 device. It's essentially a smartphone without the phone, and while the touchscreen isn't as sensitive as it should be, it is glass. It claims of having a MediaTek 6753 processor with 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of storage. It didn't come loaded with anything interesting, only 2 songs that probably weren't legitimately sourced. The inbuilt speaker is quite loud, although it doesn't sound audio accurate. I did mess around with the equalizer, but didn't get it sounding quite right. As for the operating system, it appears to have been created by the same people who create the fake clone phones with fake specifications, ALPS. And as I suspected, it even contains the fake specification switching app, allowing for total fabrication of the storage and RAM size. With a few button presses, our little nug now has 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. Or so it'll have us believe. It was at this point I also noticed some more anomalies. That 8-core CPU is non-existent, with MediaTek's own datasheet specifying only 4 for this model of processor, and the security patch of March 2022 impossible, as the last security patch released by Google for Android 8.1 was in October of 2021. Let's take a look inside and confirm what we really have. The back cover is held on with all the adhesive it could possibly have, but it's still no match for my Jimmy tool and plastic picks. A detachable battery? How luxurious. But what's less than ideal is more adhesive, and it's only just occurred to me now that I didn't actually have to remove the battery to get the board out. There's only 4 Phillips screws and a flex cable for the display to detach before the board will come free. And how about that? That was one really quick disassembly, because there isn't a whole lot inside, but what there is a sticker with the real specifications like many of the other clone phones and cheap Aliexpress devices. It does indeed have 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of storage. But the processor is actually a MediaTek 6753, a true 8-core processor. So what was written in settings is actually worse than it really has? The listing made no bold, unrealistic claims of the processor and only stated it has 8 cores, which apparently it does. So this seller was honest about the device's specifications, which for an AliExpress device is commonly unheard of. The ability to fabricate those specifications is still built into the software, so this could change at any moment, but I believe the specification switch app and false security patch information is actually a lie implemented from the software developer and not the company behind the device. So this is it. A seemingly new maker of portable media consumption devices with as advertised features and specifications for the most part. Honestly, I think out of all the things I've purchased from AliExpress, these are some of the best, and while the translation was poor on the nano-sized one, none were complete e-waste. 2 of these were actually quite good, although I would give the nano one a miss. But I'd always say to consider reusing an old phone for this same purpose. After all, it's cheaper and better to keep something going than replace it. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the MP3 player playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.